You're quite nasty, you know, with some
I
old
didn't
people.
consent to that.
It used to be, you're good too, Joe. You're really good as well.
I don't hear you unless you turn on your
Yeah,
camera.
I used to love your show, but
yeah,
then
Democrat,
you got
turn on
real,
your camera.
Guys,
talk over the top of me because it
Sounds like we're getting off to a peaceful-
Cam up, libtard.
everybody settle down.
Garrett, you've got Zoom bombers here, Joe and
I'm not
Jay.
a bomber.
They're two of the best at it, but they're
What
quite
have I
nasty.
done? What have I done to bomb?
They're quite nasty, these guys. I used to think they were really funny, but I've seen some real nasty stuff. They pick on old people. They pick on the infirm.
You're picking on young people.
I wouldn't mind your Zoom bombing if you like had fair targets, but I've seen you like do some real nasty stuff, so you can go. Garrett, it's JJ and Joe. Just
I'll get real nasty.
adios. Yeah, post this if you want.
As Democrats are protecting you from Elon Musk.
Yeah, you're both funny. Like I used to really like your show too.
I think you said this 16 times now.
You got a nasty aspect to you.
Guys, settle down. I did make you an admin, but just wait to boot them until I see that they're rude, okay?
Yeah, exactly. Like we're just here.
Jeez Louise. Didn't even get the chance to like say hi.
If they're rude, you know, you've warned them. If they're rude after that, you can boot them.
Well, we're being recorded right now. As long as you're happy with that, this is going on Zoom under there.
It says it's recording in the top left corner right now.
Yeah, you guys are recording it. They get loads of likes.
It would say if I was.
It's actually quite funny. I used to love watching it till I saw how nasty they could be. Especially JJ would get quite nasty. With some old people and some handicapped people. And I thought, I was really disappointed to see that.
Hush, little one. Can we get on with the meeting?
No, the game's up.
Don't be dismissive and don't be rude. There is a very high bar here for being polite, and the rule is that you have
I'm trying to be nice.
I understand, but he said it like 18 times now. Like
I did ask him to settle down, and Will, please settle down. Just let them try to participate, and if they're rude, then we'll boot them.
Thank you, Garrett.
Thank
you. And Garrett.
Yep.
The rules for how we behave apply to both the social and the lecture part of the presentation, correct?
Correct. Which is the one rule is to be polite. We all have to be polite, especially when we're talking about politics. So particularly important.
Garrett, are we turning our cameras back on yet?
I have my camera on. Like you guys, like I encourage people to put it on, but since we're recorded, it's up to each individual if you want to do it. But
no, I thought according to Will there was a technical difficulty or something, but no, I'm not afraid. People can look at me all they want to.
Oh, hey Joel. It's been a minute. How are you?
Clean up your desk, Dave.
You know, there was a picture that I saw of Einstein's desk, and it was the messiest desk you've ever seen, unless you looked at mine. And there was a quote that apparently, according to some study or whatever, that messy desks are brilliant minds. And I like to claim that's true because it gives me an excuse for such a messy desk. But
very true.
That reminds me, I had a co-worker in the phone company back in the last century. But he had a completely clean desk. He would take out one piece of paper at a time and deal with it and put it back in the drawer. And I showed him, I think it was an article, I think from Business Week or something like that showed William F. Buckley's desk. And actually it was a series of desks in his garage and just complete disaster areas. Yeah, I'm protecting my desktop from dust.
The messiest desk I ever saw, somebody did an interview with Lee Iacocca years ago. For those of you who don't know, he was the CEO of Chrysler. Anyway, it was the messiest office I had ever seen. Didn't quite look like a hoarder's place, but it was pretty bad. Yeah. But his mind was organized. He knew where every piece of paper was, probably.
Fred me.
Hello, everyone.
Will, what are you doing there, pal?
Oh no, just got something in my eye.
So we're gonna
wow.
We're gonna
Did Will just flip me off, or am I seeing something?
I wasn't
Yeah, I
looking.
did.
You're a
Will,
big
please,
dick, aren't you?
Seriously, dude.
please,
Yeah.
guys, don't yell. Will, don't antagonize, please.
Will just flipped me off like a big pig.
So we're in the middle of our social, and we're being very social, I can see. So let's try to be polite and social. I would
Be
love for
social,
people
pal.
to
Come
introduce
on.
themselves. Let's not talk over each other. Give each person that's speaking the chance to finish.
Thank you.
If people want to introduce themselves, JJ and Joe Martin, why don't you guys introduce yourselves, since apparently you're known by Will? I'd love to know who you guys are and where you're dialing in from and what brings you to tonight's session.
Alaska. I'm from Alaska. I'm JJ. I'm in Alaska.
Maybe if this guy can let me speak, that'd be actually great.
Please.
But
Enough, dude.
What are you, 56? You're immature, buddy.
Uh,
Immature.
JJ, please don't be rude again. This is your last warning. The next time you're
He
rude,
flipped
you're
me
gonna be
off,
removed.
though.
I understand, and I told him not to. And if you're rude again, you will be removed.
Okay, you're right. I'm gonna be the better man.
Be the better man. So where are you dialing in from, JJ? Why don't you start?
Dialing in from out in Alaska. There we go again.
We'll let him speak.
Geez, he's easily put off though. Wow. He's so easily distracted.
Will.
Where's his final warning?
Will.
Where's his warning?
Honestly, like,
I'm happy to get kicked out today. Anyway, but go on. I'll shut up. Look, the little buddy Joe will back him up. Little Joe, go on.
Will, stop.
All right.
Will,
This is
Will,
antagonism.
JJ, I'm in Alaska. Go on.
Will, I hear you. I really will remove you if you continue to be rude.
That's cool. I got somewhere else to go anyway. Today,
Come up, pal.
That's fine.
Well, I'm a little surprised. Will never be this way before.
Holy, stop! Lay down. Lay
Guys,
down.
Are you drunk?
there is going to be zero tolerance at this point. If someone
Literally.
is at all dismissive
Yeah.
and you're warned once, you're going to be gone. Joe Martin, same thing.
Can
Seriously.
At all rude, yes, seriously.
And can I say something, Garrett?
Go ahead, Michael.
This is going to get even more
We haven't even started the controversial stuff yet, guys. Sorry.
yeah. So we really have to practice being polite now, because the bar is going to be raised as we start pushing each other's buttons politically. So let's start concentrating on it now.
Okay. Can I introduce myself now?
Go ahead.
That'd be great. Okay. Well, I'm JJ. I'm dialing in from Alaska. I'm out in Alaska today. I'm dialing in from there.
Your family ever had mental or I'm
getting a little feedback, I think. Maybe I'm getting hacked. Well, I'm just here to learn because I just turned 18, so I'm just wondering who to vote for, if I should be a Democrat or a Republican. What do you? Can I get some opinions?
We'll be talking about who's right in a little bit. Loaded question, and you'll see what I mean by that. So, Joe Martin, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Joe. I'm actually calling in from the Dallas area. You know, with the 2024 election coming up, politics are starting to heat up a little bit. So I figured I find a community to educate myself a little bit.
Cool. Anyone else want to introduce themselves, where they're dialing in from, and what brings you to tonight's event?
Yeah, I will. I'm dialing in. That's so old-fashioned. From UK still, and I'm here to listen to some dirty laundry from the Americans.
we don't have any. Our politics is clean as a whistle, DLJ. Oh wait, that's not quite true. Vinny, go ahead.
Yeah, so good evening, everybody. My name's Vinny, and I live in South Florida. And I noticed on the meetup description it talked about hopefully a friendly, open discussion on politics. And I look forward to hearing everybody's views.
Great, thanks, Vinny. Sean, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sean. I live in Southward, Maryland. Just came back from Peru. I went to Machu Picchu for 10 days. So I missed to meet up here. As an older man, I like give JJ, the young man, little advice. You don't have to vote for just a Republican or Democrat. Okay, you vote for someone is decent, not a liar. That's all. Okay, that's all I want to say. You vote for
Who is
someone,
that?
not a fucking liar. Okay.
Sean,
Whoa.
Okay,
you
thank
gotta
No
keep it
vulgar
lesson,
language.
calm, neutral language, please.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry.
I know you get passionate
I will,
about your politics,
okay.
Sean. I'm gonna have to
Sorry.
warn you. So, and tonight, you be on your best behavior, my friend.
Okay, thank you. I will. Okay, I'm.
Wait, can
I'm
I
very
ask
decent,
who's
okay?
on?
If somebody criticize me, I will accept it. Okay, hello. Thank you.
Don't
Can I just
ask,
ask?
JJ. Don't ask.
Okay.
We're doing social, so it's not time for back and forth. So, Joe, go ahead.
My name is Joe Bullock. I'm calling from Philadelphia, just outside of Philadelphia, actually. Tonight's topic, the thing I'm most interested in is how you're going to actually present it. It'll be interesting to see. This is, people have strong opinions, and so, I think I might be able to walk away with a few tips on how to handle a more, I don't want to say controversial, but a more emotional topic.
Yes, I hope so. And I won't be doing a presentation tonight. I'll do a quick introduction and you'll see why I'm not doing a presentation when we get to 4 minutes from now at 7 o'clock. So Remco, good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, g'day, Garrett. Yeah, guys, hi. I live in Perth in Australia. Been watching with great interest the politics in America, in part because it's an extremely polarized nation. It's probably one of the more polarized. As an example, 80% of Republicans think that Trump did a good job. I think it's 86 actually, and only 6% of the Democrats. It's one indicator. But what's interesting about the States, it's also very well documented. It's very well analyzed. There's a lot of stuff on the web. And, for someone like me, it's fascinating. And it gives me an insight into personalities. But, just to conclude, I wanted to say one thing. What strikes me a lot is that the conversation is often, for my taste, very planar. It's like a chessboard, and people talk about it like it is planar, and they talk about this versus that. But hey, what if it's deeper? What about the deeper underlying issues? And I think these are not being articulated. So I'm going to be listening with great interest.
Great. Thanks, Remco. Samir.
I'd like to speak.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. Well, I'm more on the Democratic leftist side of politics, but a lot of what I hear about Republican and the right side is usually from sources that are very inflammatory about it. I'd like to hear the ideas of people who are from the right, from the Republican side, that are presented logically and without inflammatory language, because I'd like to know what those positions are so I can understand them better.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Samir, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, guys. I'm Samir. I'm from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Usually, what I get is from my coworkers, Michael Scott, Dwight, and I just want to know what other things are out there. I work for a company called Dunder Mifflin, so I just want to know, what Democrats, Republicans, who's right, who's wrong. Michael Scott says something, Dwight says something, Toby says some stuff, and I just want to know who's right.
Go inside. Are you with Joe Martin and JJ, Samir?
No, sir.
I feel like I hear a dog or something.
Yeah, I think there was a dog. So Samir, you can actually say your actual name and where you're from, or I'm going to remove you.
Sorry, man. My name is Samir, and I am from Philadelphia. So I'm from Pennsylvania. I was a Democrat before COVID, and I just I thought just that was a little bit funny for a second there, Michael Scott in the background. No. So yeah, I am Samir from Pennsylvania. Just want to hear what other people think. Yeah, just that.
All right. So we'll see how it goes, Samir. Hopefully you'll be taking this seriously going forward. If not, you'll be removed. So Mike H, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mike. I live in New Jersey, and I recently became a U.S. citizen, so hopefully I'll vote next year. The problem I have is that this become a team sport, and it's my team against yours. And to be honest with you, I mean, I don't care which side. I just want someone that will benefit me and my family. That's it. Will not charge me taxes, up the wazoo, and will have a decent roads, will have snow removal, will have a decent living, and I'll vote for them. I don't really care what team they are. The problem is that it's become a team sport, and people get emotional because of that. Just vote for whoever is gonna improve your life, is what I tell people. Thank you very much.
Sure. Oscar.
Yes, good evening, everyone. All right, so my name is Oscar. I'm from Elizabeth, New Jersey, and I just want to understand everyone's perspective on what is right, and that's pretty much it.
Great, thanks, Oscar. Derek.
Yeah, I'm Derek, and I'm from Canada. I don't have a dog in this fight. We have similar issues in Canada, but I'm interested in hearing, seeing if this can be a civil discourse. I was hoping that people would come to the discussion. Remembering something a wise man once said, at least he had some wisdom. He said, first seek to understand before trying to be understood. And that might be it's a good thing, concept to keep in mind when you're trying to get into a discussion with people that you are highly likely to disagree with. And
exactly right, Derek, and that's exactly what we're going to try to do tonight.
That was Jimmy Carter said that, by the way.
Are we?
I'm going to have Dave from Tacoma and then David R go, and then I'm going to sort of introduce the event and end the social.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe we're in the issues already, but
no, not yet. I think you introduced yourself already. So maybe David R, if you want to introduce yourself real quick. Did you already introduce yourself, Dave? Right?
Don't think I did tonight. Dave did more Veterans for Peace, liberal. Yeah, I believe in exchanging ideas. I think is good for both sides if we can. Thank you.
Thank you, David R.
Yeah, David, Toronto, Canada. And my own view is that both the Conservatives and the Democrats have good points in their platforms. And as long, I think where the problems are is with the extremes. I think that the middle, I'm kind of a centrist. I think probably Canada we sort of waffle around the center pretty well. Maybe the United States is a little more left and a little more right on, their politics, or your politics, I should say. But I think it's not one's right and the other's wrong. I think there's strong points that both parties make. Thank you.
Thanks. Charles, you'll be the last one, and then I'm going to introduce the topic and approach.
Winter?
Yeah, go ahead, Charles. You can just introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Charles. Yeah, so I'm fairly independent, and I much rather just kind of listen to people's views without, being bound by labels, like political labels left and right. But I do, I also feel pretty comfortable taking either side because I do think that both sides make good points, but also have a lot of, exaggerated stance and, misinformation on both sides. By the way, I'm going to be kind of in the gym. Is it okay if I mostly listen and don't have my video on?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay with you?
Yeah, you can just listen in. No worries. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the event. Just give me 1 second for a logistical situation. All right. First of all, I'll introduce myself. My name is Garrett Lang. I'm a software developer turned software inventor, now an entrepreneur. My hobby is writing and discussing practical philosophy, and I'm also the executive director of the Freethinker Institute, which is the organization that brings you tonight's event. We're a not-for-profit looking to support and empower members. We focus on helping people to be the best version of themselves, to seek truth, and to be fair through transformational personal and professional development. We have free events like this one on Tuesday evenings covering a wide range of topics not typically covered in academia or industry. We also have weekly members-only events where we apply practical philosophy into our daily lives and get to know a small group of people on a very deep level. And we have only one rule that I mentioned in the social because it was required to mention it, which is to remain polite. I do recommend, especially on a topic as inflammatory as politics, to focus on listening. We all have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we talk. I like that saying. And especially when we strongly disagree with someone, I like to say, like, the more you disagree with someone, the more that you have to learn from listening to them. And so Derek is absolutely right. That's the approach we're going to take tonight. We are, I will give a quick overview. We're going to do what I call listening to understand, where we're actually going to dive pretty deeply. We're going to violate one of our own typical rules in the FTI, which is to limit each person's comments to 3 minutes. We will go over 3 minutes sometimes to really dig deep into why someone thinks what they think. And I'll be sort of digging in by asking questions and understanding their perspective. And we're going to try to do that one person at a time, and other people can ask questions too. And so I'm going to take volunteers on a topic to be able to share a perspective. It doesn't only have to be Democrat versus Republican. It can be a third party as well. But what I would ask is once, someone shares, for example, a conservative perspective, then let's have a liberal perspective come next, and then maybe a third party perspective next. And once we've covered the major perspectives of a particular topic, we'll move on to the next topic. And so the short answer as to whether or not Democrats or Republicans are right is neither and both of them. Neither of them are right and both of them are right. And what I mean by that is it's topic dependent, right? Neither Democrats or Republicans are right all the time about everything. And if you think they are, you probably should be listening more to the other side. And so I think it's worth, spending some time listening tonight, especially the Zoom bombers, by the way, which there are still some here. And then when they start bombing, we'll get them removed very quickly. We have a bunch of people ready to do that. That said, for the Zoom bombers, if you guys want to learn how to be happier people in the FTI, that's what we do. And so feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat in case you guys want to actually find some positive ways to spend your spare time.
Garrett?
Yeah.
Did you want to say anything about raising hands and party hats?
Yes, we should do that. Do you want to cover that, Michael?
Okay. Well, if you go, you'll see on your dialogues line at the bottom where there's different things you can do. If you want to speak, then raise your hand. And if someone says something and you would like to make a comment or rebuttal to what they said, then click on the party hat. And then want me to show it?
I'm doing it now just so people see what it looks like. So it's under reactions, just so people know it's the reactions option at the bottom of your screen if you're on a desktop, or you can scroll over if you're on a tablet, and Will's doing it as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover individual topics. We're going to cover topics one at a time. And I have a couple that I've selected to start off with that we haven't already had events on. A lot of the things that are very politically divisive, we've already had events on. And so I'm going to try to cover stuff that we haven't already covered in the FTI. And so Nancy, did you want to say something, or are you just practicing?
No, I can't get it off the screen now. So
if you press the little party hat button, it'll go away. There you go. It goes away.
Yeah, I think it's my mouse. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. So so was there some okay, so basically we're gonna start with economically conservative versus economically liberal, economics as far as like, and I really want to focus on like one specific topic for economics, which is, I typically hear like economically conservative being like trying to work to pay off the debt, for example. And so, but we can have different, I don't want to get into like a whole system of economics, but maybe focus on the debt. Like, should we pay it off? Should we be borrowing more, which is what we've been doing for quite some time. Since I think Clinton was like the last one that I remember that actually started paying off the debt. And so, why don't we start with that? And I'd love to hear the perspective of someone that thinks that we should pay off the debt or be working towards paying off the debt if they want. So Vinny raised his hand. And so we're going to take the raise of hands. And by the way, when you raise your hand, you may get asked a lot of questions so that we can do what we call listening to understand, which is trying to dig into why you think what you think. And so Vinny's going to be our person to talk about paying off the debt. And so we're going to be with Vinny for some time, probably to hear his perspective and understand where he's coming from. And so, Vinny, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So, paying off the debt is going to be a huge task. I mean, really, I think the thing that we need to be thinking about right now is slowing down the rate of growth in the deficit, and at some point get to paying down the debt. We're, I think, $33 trillion in debt today. I think we're paying interest of $688 billion, which is about 25% of the revenues coming in from to the federal government. And there's two things that are going to impact the interest rate payments, one being the continued rise in the deficit, and two, obviously interest rates are a lot higher. So as existing debt comes to maturity, you're going to have to renew that debt with a lot higher interest rate. So there's a double whammy there. So obviously that is not something that our country can sustain unless they decide to raise taxes, which hopefully there's not too many of us here that want to pay taxes. So really, it would be nice to see the Democrats and the Republicans come together and have a clear understanding of that and come to some reasonable plan that over a period of years, if they can, one, reduce the deficit, and then at some point in time, start paying off some of the debt. And that'll help the country to continue to be the dominant that it is in the world. But if we continue on this path, unfortunately, we get to a point where you're going to have to raise taxes as individuals will become poorer, and the country is not going to have the position in the world that it does today.
Thanks, Vinny. And actually, I feel like you laid that out pretty effectively. I don't know if anyone has questions for Vinny to better understand his perspective. I thought he did a pretty good job of explaining why we should pay off the debt. I will say, I think what we should do is separate out, should we pay off the debt versus should we not be working towards paying off the debt? And I'm curious if there's anyone that thinks that we should not be working to pay off the debt after we ask Vinny any other questions that people may have about why he thinks we should pay off the debt. Sounded like a pretty convincing argument to me. A lot of that resonates with me. Does anyone have questions for Vinny? Don John?
Sorry, I had to get my, yeah, that's not possible to pay off the debt. The only way to pay off the debt is through inflation and productivity growth. Sorry, I can turn my camera on so I can be seen as a person. That's all I want to say. This is in household economics, you know. The reality is it's all, I mean, I don't want to go into depth here, but this is illogical. If you have a corporation and a company, and America's not a company, that dominates their market share, that has the best brand in the world, but happens to have old equipment, old, productivity and that sort of thing, what do? They borrow money because they are on top. They don't start paying their debt off. We don't need to pay our debt off. We need to invest in our country and invest in our people. The greatest asset that we have in this country is human potential, and we're denying that. Explain to me how much genius is ignored, it resides with the repressed and the ignored. But instead we want to talk about paying off some debt with this imaginary money. I mean, the problem with the monetary system as a whole, it's just not even connected to the advancement of the human condition. I mean, think about that. We have a healthcare system in which we talk about money rather than health outcomes. Every time you see a politician debate the healthcare system, it's about the money. Healthcare is not about the money.
Let's not delve into healthcare. We got to start with.
But it's all the same relevant. It's all relevant, Garrett. It's relevant because people are putting money ahead of people. Money is not people. It's not attached to any outcome, any human outcome. Period. End of story. But
sorry, go ahead.
I'll stop because I could go on forever.
Yeah, let's
an idiotic system.
Let's get to some questions. So you said that it's not possible to pay off the debt. Can you help me understand why you think that is?
Hold on, I keep turning off. Yeah, because you have a growing population, whether you like immigration or not. The only way to grow an economy is to have a growing population. You have a growing population. You have an increase. You're going to have a natural increase in inflation, okay, because of the way that sort of thing. And it's not possible because what you're going to do is reduce the velocity of money. You start taking money out of this system, you're reducing the velocity of money in the economy, and there's going to be less money for everybody. You're talking about taxes. That's nothing compared to starting to try to take money out of the system to literally reduce the long-term debt. I'm not talking about the annual deficit. It's illogical. You just grow out of it. That's how we did it with World War II. That's how we always do it. That's how you do it.
So what about Brunei, Kuwait, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Palau, Estonia, and Saudi Arabia? They all have either no debt or very low amounts of debt compared to.
Could you name those accounts? Could you name those countries that all seem to be tiny and irrelevant? I don't mean they're irrelevant.
Saudi Arabia is
relative to the largest economy in the world and the person that secures democracy.
You use the word logic as though it's obvious that you should keep spending money. I disagree. I don't think that what you're saying is obvious or logical.
I'm sure you know.
Well, let's ask questions, David, to understand.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. Why would it be illogical to pay down your debt?
Because I've just made the comment. If people that create organizations, economic organizations, don't pay down debt when they need to invest, and when they can I finish? Can I finish?
Okay.
May I jump in regarding that?
Yeah, just let me finish.
The
point I'm making is, we start paying down the debt, we're going to not be investing in infrastructure, not be investing in the citizenry, not be investing in these things. And what do we end up with? We end up with a failed country. Okay, we can't pay the debt off. You're going to have to reduce the flow of money, what's called the velocity of money. You want to reduce the velocity of money? You give up 10% of your income, David. fine to pay off the debt. Everybody here, let's give up our 10% because that's what's got to happen. You're going to
No,
take the money out of
the only way.
called
That's not the only
velocity,
way to pay off
called
the debt.
velocity of money.
You know, using that velocity of money quote doesn't tell you anything unless there's a reason. What I would suggest is that debt, I think you're also alluding to this, debt is reasonable when it is used to create productivity. In other words, as you said, a successful company that needs new equipment to keep on ahead of the curve and you know, being productive,
they don't
that
pay off
makes
their debt.
sense. But the question I have is does the government really create, or is it productive, the money that it spends? I think that's a big question. Is a lot of the money that the government spends is necessary, but I would also think that it perhaps is also wasteful, and that's not productive. And I think we all agree debt is good when it creates productive equipment, people, you know, infrastructure. Who's going to argue about that as long as it's productive? But the question I think a lot of conservatives have is government spending is not always or often not productive.
It's not true.
Yeah,
So are you saying, hold on, I want to understand, hold on one second. I want to understand, Don John said that's not true. Are you saying, Don John, that every dollar the government spends is productive?
That doesn't matter. That's not the point. I mean,
doesn't matter. Come on,
no. You're narrowing it down to every dollar. Of course, there's waste. There's waste in your family. There's waste, always waste. We're talking about in toto. We're talking about the whole thing. Now, let me ask you a question. How did America become militarily dominate the security of the world? We protect democracy in the world. How did we build a middle class when no other country in the world had a middle class? None. Okay. How did we become the most profoundly powerful economy in the world? How did we do it? Did we do it because David put money into, and excuse me, I'm not trying to be a smart ass. I am, but don't mean to be that way. It was because he put money into it? Or is it because we, the people, chose, and through leadership, obviously we had the New Deal, we had the war, and that was all government money, government spending. And we came out of that, Keynesian economy so powerful that we dominated the world for 4 decades.
So
but
let me ask you.
I would argue there's a lot more.
Guys, hang on one second. I want to ask Don John, is there a limit to how much we should borrow? Or what if we got to the point where
I'm not look,
what if we got let me finish.
Yeah,
what if we got to the point where the interest payments on our debt were literally equal to the revenue of the country? Is that okay?
Look,
that's a good question. That's what I want to ask.
If you want to ask, I mean, if you want to take me to my furthest extreme, I think the monetary system is a disaster right now. Because one, it's not connected to the advancement of the human condition. But I'm here to talk about what reality we have today instead of what is possible that human beings could do. Of course, there is an ultimate limit. But I mean, you could look at China today and people suggesting that China overspent. But the reality is they spent, and yes, they have an excess of housing that's just sitting there and all that, but they have everything their people need, you know, and they're not going to crash. Their economy is not going to crash. They're going to work through it. So yeah, sure, there's a point where, but that point isn't necessarily money. It's more in productivity. Have we exceeded the ability to be productive? I mean, again, I return back to the human potential and what we could do if we didn't repress so many human beings from pursuing their potential. So the thing that represses people from pursuing their potential is access to capital. I'm an artist and I've got all kinds of great ideas, but I don't have access to capital. Now, why not? Why shouldn't I? How come Elon Musk has access to capital and I don't? But
why should you?
No. Think about that. Seriously, if a good idea
I am thinking seriously. You say you've got great ideas, but you know, obviously, not everyone agrees.
Well, I haven't been out selling them, but the point is that's just it. You're in a winner take all economy. You're worried about a winner take all economy, and you're not looking at economy that as they call it, lift all boats. I hate all that. That's not what we need to be. We need to be in a person economy where our fellow citizens rise up, where we value our economy based on the potential of the human beings that are involved in it. Because everyone I guarantee you 9 out of 10 people on here have greater potential than what they're doing every day, without a doubt. And somebody raise their hand and say they're fulfilling their full potential. And the reason you're not is you've got to go to work for the man, and you've got to pay for needs, which are abundant anyway. It's a bizarre system.
Here's my take.
So what kind of, kumbaya, man.
You're living in a system that's failing.
Yeah, everyone should have lots of money. I mean,
everyone have an equal.
Idealistic here. You're just way off on the left field.
I'm not way off on the left.
Or right, or whichever.
Everyone have an equilibrium. If you have say controllable debt is all right, but that's got a limit, sir. You can't have cannot borrow forever. Okay.
Let me clarify something. We have an economy.
Way to control our
guys, please do a party hat if you want to comment. Please do a party hat if you want to comment, and we'll get to you. Okay, there's like 8 party hats. So Charles, go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is I do think there's a lot that I don't necessarily agree with the previous speaker, but I do think there are a couple of very salient fundamental points. One is that when we're talking about cutting, the debt, we're fundamentally talking about some economic trade-off between, what is the alternative that we would be spending the money on. So I think this is, so if you're going to be cutting the debt, you're either going to be either producing more, so generating more income, or generating more income through higher taxes or some sort of, kind of extractive mechanism, or you're going to be reducing spending. And some of our biggest spending aspects may include the military, may include, social welfare programs, so on and so forth. So it's fundamentally about a trade-off. I, for one, would like to kind of hear more speakers talk about trade-offs. The other thing I do agree with the previous speaker is about the whole productivity and debt situation. So in economic theory, if your productivity growth is higher than your debt growth, then yes, you should all borrow as much debt as you want, as long as the marginal productivity is greater than marginal cost of debt. However, I think whether societies can continue borrowing forever, this is a very kind of good question, because there are many societies, including pretty powerful ones, that have got themselves too overburdened with debt. For example, the England or British Empire, which the sun never sets until their pound crashed sometime in the 1970s. And I want to remind people that when it comes to the United States, yes, we have the exorbitant privilege of being the world's reserve currency, and therefore we can print as much money as we want. But already there's been a lot of talk in the United States, around the world, in financial circles, that if the United States doesn't get its debt under control, there would be a crash in the United States dollar, which would bring painful adjustments for everyone, including hurting people's productivity by having crazy catastrophic inflation. I'm not talking about 10%. I'm talking about the likes of 100% or more, and all sorts of terrible economic disruption that we would not like. So I want to kind of bring these couple of issues into the conversation as well. Thank you.
John, did you want to respond to that?
No, there's a lot to unpack there, and I want to let other people speak.
Okay, so Abe, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I would like, I agree that the debt has to be managed, but it can't be managed on the middle class and poor, and let the rich go off, because it creates an uneven, unsustainable gap between the rich and poor, because it's always happened. Every time there was this huge gap, there's been catastrophe, and it can't sustain itself. You have the haves and the have-nots, and you have a huge amount of disgruntled people, and this is what happens. You have the it comes up with violence, and you blame the immigrants and you blame the poor.
We actually had a conversation on immigration, and it turns out immigrants pay 4 times as much taxes as people who are non-immigrants, which actually shocked me. I had no idea of that. I always figured it was the other way around, because that's what people generally say, but it turns out not to be based in reality. So that said, Dave from Tacoma, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Garrett. And I'm going to kind of take off from where Abe was talking. To me, the question is, who's going to pay it off? Who's going to pay off the debt? And you're talking about, well, let's increase taxes 10% or whatever. No, the problem in our country is the rich versus the poor. It's the disparity in wealth and income, which are two different things. Right now, the wealthy, they have enough money, they could pay off the debt this afternoon with their checkbook. The problem is we have a large number of large corporations that pay nothing towards making things work. A lot of the very wealthy pay nothing because we have the best government money can buy. Say you're Exxon, you can give $1 million to every congressman and every senator, and they'll write the rules in your favor. Now, how much can you contribute? That's the problem, is that we have no regulation on this lobbying and everything else. I would posit that there ought to be a limit. I'd say maybe $100 or whatever of how much you contribute to the representative from your district and your senators and the guy, or pardon me, man or woman running for president. But right now we've got people spreading money throughout the whole system. And like Bezos and Musk or whatever, they have enough money to have a race so you can go up into space and float for 3 minutes. And they think they're going to come back in heroes. But I've got 3,000 people homeless in my county, and in Seattle, there's 5,000 homeless up there. Until from World War II to 1980, the cost of living and productivity and wages went up in parallel. But since 1980, wages have pretty much been flat, and the rich have taken everything. So this has to be reversed. Enough for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. And an interesting statistic, 80% of the economic growth has gone to the top 1% of the US population. But out of that 1%, 80% of that economic growth went to the top 1% of the top 1%. So it's not even about 99 versus 1%. It's 1% of 1% that get the vast majority of economic growth. So Dave R. And then we're going to go back to hands.
Okay. Oh, alrighty. Yeah, inflation. That's print money, create inflation, the economy eventually collapse. So you want to be limiting debt, because otherwise, yeah, I know, Don John, you don't think so, but look at Ecuador. Look at there's so many countries where they just printed money, and now annual inflation is over 100%. That's not where you want. Yeah, sure. It's no problem perhaps for you, but for a lot of people, it would be a huge problem. So, like I said before, I think the point is really well made. I think it was Charles that was also on the same point. If you're spending money, if you're creating debt to help productivity, it's good debt. If you're spending money and you're not really increasing productivity, you're just spending money, that's bad debt. And I think the United States probably does some of both, and I'm not sure how that would, if maybe somebody here would know how much of government debt is productive versus unproductive. This mom's apple pie, money ahead of people saying it's just way too airy-fairy for real economists and people talking about the real economy in the United States.
Economy is a made-up, economics 101. The economy is just a made-up human enterprise. That's all I have to say. Sorry, I interrupted. I should have.
Sorry.
Yeah. Economics 101, money ahead of people. That's not economics 101. That's hippy dippy 101.
Economics is a social science created by human beings. We can create other economies, but I have my hand up and I'll.
Yeah. So Samir, why don't you go next? And I don't know if maybe we can. I think we did a good job hearing everyone about whether or not we should pay off the debt or not. So maybe we can move on to the next subject if that's okay with everybody. I guess I will suggest that, where was I? Okay, so I think what about healthcare? I'd love to hear perspectives on healthcare. If people can sort of share a perspective. We can start with Samir if you want to share a perspective on healthcare and let us know what label you think your perspective is coming from, if you have one.
Yes.
What you think.
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna just tie in just a little bit to the last topic. And I'm just gonna use two just for the debt, just a little bit, and I apologize. 2 years, 1945, which was the end of World War II, and 1998 when the debt was paid off. That's 53 years. I think right now what we're doing is we're kind of like fighting amongst ourselves. It's 53 years. I was born in 1983, so that makes me 40 years old right now. So 53 years, that's 1945 from the end of World War II to 1998 when the debt was paid off. I think what we should be focusing on and what would be more productive, right? We're the United States, we're the best country in the world. We're the most diverse country in the world, right? Is our kids. The fact that I'm 40 years old right now. There's some people that are my age, younger, older, whatever the case may be, right? The debt's going to get paid off, right? As long as the fact that our kids are competitive with what's going on in the world, in the economy, whatever, right? If this was 1945, right, and we were having a conversation, would we have a conversation that, oh, we just had World War II, I'm sorry, and now MacArthur plan, take care of Europe, Korea, whatever, right? Like I think we're thinking of it like from a wrong perspective. We should make sure that the future generation is taken care of, because if the future generation is taken care of, the debt will be taken care of, right? We're being very selfish. I know like being selfish hurts, right? Like if I'm selfish, right? If I do something that's for myself versus for my kids or grandkids, right? That hurts me, right? But at the end of the day, right? To help the country, to help my kids and my grandkids, right? I have to think of what is better for them, what is the best investment, because at the end of the day, right, no matter, we're the most diverse country in the world, we're the best country in the world. In China, a few years back, I read an article where they take they'll go out and see to whatever, new city that was just created, they'll be like, parents go out with their kids and be like, this was farmland before. Like now it's a city, right? Or, when they're going out in space or whatever the case may be, right? That's their perspective. That's how they're introducing a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old into what is possible. And right over here, as we were talking, right, I may have missed a few things, right? But how many of us are thinking from the perspective of our kids and our grandkids and our great grandkids versus like, hey, these taxes are hurting me. Because in 1945, right, the taxes may have been hurting them. In 1955, the taxes may have been hurting them. But in 1998, we moved forward, right? Society was a lot different. We had the internet, whatever, right?
So try to finish up your thoughts, Samir.
No, you're fine. That was.
I want to correct Samir one more question, sir.
Yes, sir.
1998, we did not pay off our debt. We balanced our budget and made a surplus under Bill Clinton. Okay, we never paid off our debt. That's a different concept. Okay, when Bill Clinton left office, his annual surplus is $600 billion, passed to dear George W. Bush, who basically sent back to taxpayer by their income. Okay, more you pay the tax, you get more refund. Okay, instead he paid our tax and he started 2 wars and cut tax for rich. This is how we get into trouble. Okay.
Great,
I was
thanks.
there.
So Joe, do you want to?
I got a few $100 rebate from that policy. Okay.
Thanks, Sean. Joe, do you want to comment on healthcare? Do you want to present a perspective on healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, I have not given as much thought to healthcare in the sense that I think the one problem every time I try and learn a little bit more about it is that there's a lack of transparency in the costs themselves, and not being able to understand the costs actually makes it impossible in order for me to have an opinion. I have the basic opinion that everybody should be covered and have an opportunity and not necessarily go into bankruptcy because of medical bills. I think that it's a hindrance on people's lives. But without truly actually understanding what it actually costs to have a procedure done, it's really hard to have an opinion as to what the solution ought to be, what type of solution should be put forward. So the example would be, was Obamacare the best solution given the way the American system is currently structured? And it's very hard to say whether yes or no, just based on the fact that you can't figure out what the cost of a procedure. If you go to the hospital, the bills are outlandish. So that the negotiation seems like between the insurance companies and the hospitals, and I don't know exactly how that is, reconciled all the time. There's even if you want to get a price on something like a CAT scan or something along those lines, you wouldn't just call a hospital and actually figure that out. And so, it's really hard to determine what would be the right policy. I'll just say as a starting point, I think everybody should be covered and not necessarily go into debt and put into bankruptcy because of that. So that's my thought on healthcare, because I knew there was an initiative not too long ago I thought it was going to be between Jamie Dimon, Warren Buffett, and Jeff Bezos that were supposedly going to really look into what the costs were. I've not seen anything from that, whatever consortium. Again, I think anybody that really kind of says that they have a solution to the healthcare problem, I would just love to know if they have an understanding of what the trade-offs are. And it would be interesting to see, because there's not a lot of good data out there. That's all I'll say.
When you say that everyone should get healthcare, do you think that everyone should get healthcare for every type of coverage of everything they want, or that there should be, reasonable healthcare for, for people, or that there should be limits to it to some degree?
Well, there's no system that would be able to sustain it where everybody gets what they want. I mean,
right.
so that's just not sustainable. So there would be trade-offs, now, yeah. So.
And why do you think that everyone should get healthcare?
I think that it is, I think that certain people are starting out in a situation where that they can end up in debt, and it turns into a spiral of sorts. And your health is not something that's really under your control. And I think that it's kind of there's a justice aspect to it, but there's also the practical aspect of it. You have individuals that are no longer, I don't want to say they fall out of the workforce, but they surely have a more difficult time, at least, becoming more productive.
Yeah.
So if you're bankrupt.
By the way, I want to make an announcement. Derek is going to go after I make this, and then Abe after him. But I have two screens because we have a lot of people here, and someone got upset at me for not calling on them and ended up leaving, but I didn't see they had a party hat on because they were on my second screen. So if I don't call on you with the party hat, just talk. When there's like a gap, if you're on my second screen, then I just can't see the party hat. So I apologize for that person. Hopefully they'll see the recording, but yeah, I can't see two screens at once. So that said, I want to let Derek go, and then and maybe let's ask questions of Joe on his perspective, or if you guys want to make comments, you can. But if you have questions for Joe, feel free to ask there as well, which is the idea of the party hat, is that you're asking questions of the existing person rather than presenting a new perspective.
My turn?
Yeah, go ahead, Derek.
Okay,
and
yeah,
it'll be Abe.
There's this question, sometimes people are somehow make an assumption that there are solutions. There aren't any, there are only trade-offs. It reminds me of, rule number one in economics is there's not enough resources to give everybody everything they want. Rule number one in politics is to ignore the first rule of economics. But that's what politicians do. They pretend to be all things to all people, and somehow can solve all the problems if they just reorganize things enough, or ignore certain problems and pay attention to others. But the fact of the matter is there are trade-offs. I'm glad to hear the trade-off word being used, at least by some, because it is reality.
Got it. Let me because we have this is the second person to say this. We've been hearing from a lot of guys, so I want to hear Anna's perspective, and then Abe will go to you afterwards.
Okay. I firmly believe in universal health care. I have worked for two of the largest healthcare insurance companies in this nation, and frankly, I found it a crock. These negotiations with your employer, for example, with different insurance companies are absurd. And I can give you a couple of examples. We processed Enron's healthcare. Well, you know what their company said? Give them whatever they want. It was basically, there were no guidelines. Other companies were ridiculous. And then we had insurers suddenly go, well, let's see, the diagnosis codes are now 3 digits, 0.1 digit, but we're going to 2 digits. Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So what happens? All your claims that come in and they'd be denied because there was only 1 digit. And they did this, by the way, in the middle of the year. Just stupid things like this. It's stupid. We should, the most cost-effective payment was actually Medicare claims. I know it's hard to believe, but it was true. I think we need universal health care. I think it is a right. And I would put some limitations. If you want a nose job, pay for your own nose job, for example. If you want a breast augmentation, pay for it yourself. Unless, of course, you had a mastectomy. In that case, yeah, we should be paying for it. Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Anna. Abe, you're next, and then Mike H after that.
Yeah, I agree with Anna, who talked about this universal healthcare, because what we have now is a total bunch of confusion, and it's more expensive. I think it's the role of the government to give us security, education, and healthcare. I think the government, based on what I see now, I think the Canadian system is much better than the US system, comparatively. People are going bankrupt here because of the healthcare bills. So all put together, I think in the end run, I think it's more economical to have a universal healthcare which is managed by the government via the states. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Abe. There's also a practical economic perspective, which is, if someone dies of cancer during their productive years, they're not paying taxes during the rest of their life. And there's an economic benefit to keeping citizens healthy, not just the fact that it's a more fair thing to do when we can afford to, as the wealthiest country in the world, or the biggest economy in the world, I should say. Our GDP per capita is not the biggest, but we're amongst the highest. That said, Mike H, you were next with the party hat if you want to comment on that. And then I'd love someone that thinks that we should not have universal health care that wants to speak up. So Mike H, go ahead, and then I'd love someone to maybe after Mike H will maybe type in the chat if you think that there should not be universal health care coverage for all citizens. I'd love to hear from that perspective as well, because it sounds like most people so far that have spoken agree with it. I want to hear the dissenting opinion. So Mike H, go ahead.
Thanks. So about the universal health care, why does anybody think that it's a good idea? I have no idea, to be honest with you.
So I did ask that, but go ahead.
Okay.
You want to know why people think it was a good idea, so I can let some of the other people that spoke. I did ask that question, but we can cover it again.
Okay.
Anna raised your hand, so maybe
let me finish,
okay.
Garrett, please. So I lived in 2 countries before the US, and they both had free health care, and it was miserable. One of them went bankrupt, and the other one was a miserable health care. I'm not going to mention the country. And the only problem I see with the US is the insurance and the transparency that, I don't know, someone mentioned at the top of the topic. The transparency. I go to the hospital, I have no idea how much I'm going to be paying. And I always tell them, listen, if you want to charge me anything, I have to approve it first. Otherwise, I'm not going to pay you anything. So they end up just telling me how much it's going to cost. And my health insurance covers it. What I want is a catastrophic coverage. So if you have an illness that will last the rest of your life and the treatment is very expensive, like $20,000 a year or something, I want to help you out and I want to cover it. If you get a heart attack, you should be insured. So I want the government for the really big things, which is what the government is for, is not to pamper every citizen. The government is meant for big things like build the army, build highways across states, cover you in case you get cancer, God forbid, or cover you if you have a heart attack or if you have some kind of like rheumatoid disease or something that will last for the rest of your life. I'd like to help you. Thank you very much.
So, Mike, I guess if you're saying that we shouldn't get universal health care, let's take the scenario of, like I talked about, say someone that's, midlife, 40 years old, gets cancer, has, $200,000 or $300,000 worth of savings that they were putting towards retirement, and they get cancer. All of that money goes to cancer treatments. They still aren't cured, and they go bankrupt. Like, is that okay?
No, I said I want catastrophic coverage in case of heart attacks, cancer, or like diseases like rheumatoid that will last, and you need, injections every week or whatever that costs $4,000 an injection.
Right.
I'd like to cover you for that, but I don't want to cover you if you get a cold or if you break your foot or whatever. That stuff you can handle on your own, but the big things I want to cover.
Got it.
I'm sorry, I have to interject.
Yeah, hang on. Anna had her party hat on before you,
wait.
Sean. Anna had her party hat on before you, Sean. Just give one. You'll come. Sean, I saw your party hat, Sean, and you were right after Anna. She beat you to it. She's a little faster on the draw, my friend. So, Anna, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, if you want catastrophic coverage, you can buy it right now. Costs a lot, but it can. But the principle behind insurance is you have a non-fragmented population. The minute you start saying, okay, if I get a heart attack, suddenly the government pays, doesn't work that way. The payment for all of this comes from people who don't get heart attacks, and you are the exception. You can't just have it for your particular scenario. But the original question was, what are the benefits? Well, negotiating prices is the start. I mean, we're doing a little bit with medications now, but we certainly could do more. You want to know how much it costs? Well, it's going to depend on who is your insurance carrier right now.
But Anna, the problem is not that. The problem is you degrade the quality. So I know people that used to cross the border to get x-rays in Michigan because the wait time where they lived, and I'm not going to say which country, but you probably guessed it, was like 3 or 4 months, right? That's a personal story for me, right? And the same thing.
Are you saying that that is intrinsic to universal coverage, or are you saying that in your experience in a particular country, it happened? I don't think that's intrinsic.
Who's paying for it? Okay, the bottom line, I'm sorry to say it, and I'm not like, it's the money. Who's gonna pay for it? And I've seen a lot of abuse, like 7-hour wait in a ER because there are people ahead of you, and there are no doctors. And if the government is paying the doctor incentive is to the government and to see as many patients is not for you to you. Here in the US, if I see a doctor and they are no good, I'm not going to go to them again. So their incentive is to be good. So I go again and pay them again. In the previous country, you go to a doctor and the doctor doesn't care about you. He's getting paid or she's getting paid regardless from the government. That's a problem to me.
You're talking about Canada, and I'm in Canada. Doctors here are very concerned and caring, but you're right that I know quite a few people who go to the States to get stuff done quicker because it's so slow here in Toronto.
Can you not pay in Canada for like for a procedure if you pay cash out of pocket like you do in the US?
No, it's generally frowned down upon. Doug Ford, our Premier of Ontario, is suggesting that specialized clinics that are for profit should be utilized because they work faster, because our government system of healthcare is bogged down and suffers from long wait times. And so there's the question is, how do we improve that? And a lot of people do end up going to the States.
Got it.
Or they also they do health vacations where they go to India or someplace like that and get I knew a lady who got a whole new set of teeth, implants in India because it was just too expensive here in Canada. But I guess anyway,
I'm going to let Derek go, and then I'm going to make a comment myself. Actually, I'm going to put my party hat on. Go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, the problem with I'm not making a strong argument against universal health care, but what should that mean? What do you mean by universal, and what should it include? I know from the Canadian experience, we generally have a system where neither the person receiving the service nor the person or the entity providing the service have any responsibility for the costs. That's just a fact. So that's a bit of an economics accountability problem right there. The other thing we have is we have costs escalating to governments. It's taking up a bigger and bigger proportion of provincial budgets. There's some federal funding goes in, but primary responsibility for healthcare is provincial. And so it's the accelerating cost of healthcare is crowding out other quite justifiable public expenditures. We also have, correlating with that is the fact we have people complaining about a shortage in the province. I live in British Columbia. There's a shortage. People are complaining about a shortage of physicians, and looking at family physicians primarily. Well, I decided to look up the data, and I found that the province has been, the number of physicians and the family physicians in the province has been growing faster than the population. In fact, twice the rate. And yet there's a shortage of physicians. Why is that? That means people are using the family physicians more and more than we didn't used to have this problem of shortage of family physicians. We have a sicker population. What is going on here? To me, that there's some demographic shifts or something going on that's driving up those costs. There's also the other thing, and I think one of the other speakers alluded to, and that was the waiting list issue. In Canada, you have the right to be on a waiting list for healthcare for some of these surgical procedures like joint replacements. But apparently it's also that you have the right to die on that waiting list. And some people have died on waiting lists. We're just waiting for these surgeries. They die of some other cause because of their immobility brings along other problems and they end up dying of that. So to boot, these governments prevent these private clinic options for people who have, you could take 15,000 and renovate your basement, but if you have that $15,000 to go and pay a private clinic that isn't allowed to operate to have the procedure done, that's illegal. So there's a bit of a liberty problem involved in the form of healthcare, Medicare that we have in Canada that. And it sounds like the Premier of Ontario might be entertaining a partial solution by having some of these private clinics speed up the process. But some people might think our system is better than what they have in the United States, but careful what you wish for.
Can I just say one thing quick, Garrett, if I may?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the other thing I observed is that when you have free healthcare within a population, what end up happening is that the less fortunate people end up moving in to that population because, of course, they want the free healthcare. The richer population, because of the tax burden, end up moving out, and that is always a spiral. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to let Anna go. She had her party hat on. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Oops. Okay. I was going to mention these complaints seem to be coming from higher income perspective. I'm thinking that our rural counties, for example, they don't even have health care. The doctors are moving out. I think everyone deserves to have a hospital or a clinic that can serve them at the time when they need it. And we don't have it here, especially in maternal care, for example, more especially in Black maternal care. We have a terrible deficit in that. So, okay, if you want to get your hip replaced and you have to wait, fine. I can speak as having had a hip replacement. I lived just fine without it for months, and I was okay, because you can't just get that right away here either. That's all.
So Anna, even though I'm against universal healthcare, but this particular situation you mentioned, that's a job for the government. Because if there is unless you want the population to die and be deserted, but which is not what we say in here. So if some population somewhere that cannot seem to get the care, we should be paying for that.
Well, first you have to get doctors in that area.
I'm curious to hear the perspective if there's anyone that thinks that 40-year-old person that I was talking about that gets cancer with $300,000 worth of savings, they spend all their life savings getting, should they have to spend all their life savings getting cancer treatments and potentially die of cancer because they can't afford any more treatments? And, Don John, you have your party hat on, so I'm hoping that you're going to tell me that you think that person should die, because if not, then party hat is not the appropriate response. Okay, so does anyone think that person should die and that the government should not cover that healthcare perspective? Because this is something that, I have struggled to understand. Like, when we talk about not covering healthcare expenses, why would we want to let that person bankrupt themselves and die for lack of money? Is there anyone that can rationalize doing that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much tonight.
No, go ahead, Mike.
If I
So
can add,
this is gonna sound.
No, go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. This is gonna sound cruel, but what motivates people and me personally when I came to the US, because I didn't have coverage at first, that motivated me like hell to work really hard and advance myself and get a better job and make more money so I can actually pay in case something happens. It is cruel to say that, but what motivates you if the government is pampering you and taking care of you in every aspect, including healthcare? What motivates you to get up in the morning and learn new things so you can actually get a better job and make more money? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Anna, go ahead.
Actually, if you have something like cancer, you can't make enough money to cover the costs as it now is. You simply can't. So, I mean, sure, work hard and get good insurance, and your insurance is going to cap out at maybe 1 million or so, and then there you go. And if you're not working, you don't have the insurance. You might have to go on COBRA and pay, what, 3 or 4 times what you've been paying. That's not a solution.
I am in that situation right now. My wife had breast cancer, and my daughter has one of those chronic diseases that require this injection for $3,000-4,000. That's why I gave those examples. So I sort of have a personal, and I still refuse the universal health care because I've seen what it can. I was born, like, I don't want to bash the country I was born in, but I was born in Egypt, and they had free health care, and then the 50s. It was wonderful. End up going bankrupt because the resources and the people abuse end up consuming it, and you cannot raise taxes anymore, and quality goes down. People start getting away from it into private clinics, and that's how it collapsed.
So are you able to pay for all your expenses right now?
Through Anthem, yes. They cover a lot of it, but I pay like 10-15 grand a year just for my daughter's injection. And we pay for my wife's cancer medications, several thousand a year as well. But yeah, that's, and I still refuse it for all. Sorry.
I had my party hat on. I have a short comment, if I may.
Go ahead, Mike. I didn't see it if you were before Abe and David. I saw both of them, so.
Okay, there's a magic word here called triage. You can't make everybody happy in this. This is a constrained optimization problem of limited resources, and there are solutions to that problem, but not everybody is going to be happy. So, and if you try to make everybody happy and you try to make healthcare free, there's a famous comment that I heard: if you think healthcare is expensive now, wait until it's free, and then you'll find out how much it really costs. Yeah, and that's where we're sitting now, and we have to react to it. And there's lots of papers and lots of whistleblowers and lots of studies from distinguished people who've addressed this problem the way we're addressing it. And that's why I'll add one more thing and then I'll go away. There are more MRI machines on the second floor of one of the major teaching hospitals in New York than there are in all of Canada. When you get an MRI study in Canada, they do one cross section and they try and interpret it, and they may send it to India to interpret. While it might take 50 slices and retries to do a successful MRI study that'll find the root cause of a problem.
Thanks.
Yeah, may I
Um,
speak, please? I've been
yeah,
waiting
go ahead,
for
Abe.
25 minutes.
Yeah, go ahead, Abe.
Yeah.
This is not Abe. This is Brito.
Oh,
This
I'm
is
sorry.
Dr.
Who is
B.
it?
Dr. B.
Dr.
I
B.
have had my hand up
yeah,
for 25 minutes. But
you've
would you
been
tell
putting
me,
your
first
party
of
hat
all,
on. I'm sorry, Dr. B.
I don't know what the, I don't even know what the party hat is.
Oh,
because I don't know where to
under
go. That's the reason
reactions.
I've raised I've seen the hat.
Yeah,
I
so
don't know which one it
I
is.
think we probably.
Is that the, can you put it up? Can you show me
Yeah,
the?
I'll put it up
this-
now. Like under reactions, if you do this one,
Okay.
that's the party hat. And the idea of the party hat is it's supposed to be like asking a question of the person who just commented. So it should be listening to understand that perspective of the person, not presenting a new perspective. So I do want to, like, Michael, help me enforce this. If someone is starting to bring up a new perspective when they raise the party hat, we're going to cut you off because we have a lot of people with hands up and I want to hear what they have to say as well. And so party hats should only be for asking a question of someone that just spoke, to better understand their perspective.
Do you want me to silence them?
Yeah, you can actually mute them if they're starting a new topic. And guys, if we mute you, please just raise your hand and then you'll be able to present a new perspective afterward. In order. So that said, go ahead.
Proceed.
I think based on what Anna and Mike were saying, I think it's the right of an American citizen, for healthcare. It's not a luxury or an option. I think they better work it out so that they have universal healthcare. Everybody gets something. I mean, we can't have a few people having healthcare and the majority finding it very difficult to afford healthcare. And this is one of the things I think it's high time we worked out. I mean, whatever said and done, I mean, you can bash the Canadian model, but it somehow works. They seem to be happy. I mean, they may have nuances as to what they can't have, and it's not like the way it is in the US, but overall, everybody is covered. And that's all I have to say.
Mike, you put your party hat on. Is this a question for Dr. B?
Yeah, I would have to say that a premise is that everybody does have health care in the United States. What they don't have is health insurance. They don't have the degree of health care that they would like to have. But no one in the entire world has the degree of health care that they would like to have.
That's not true.
Actually, and Steve Jobs had 3 successful liver transplants until he decided he wasn't going to play that game anymore.
Mike, why do you think that everybody in America has health care?
You can go to the emergency room if you have a broken leg or if you are coughing up blood, and they'll give you a diagnosis and they'll give you some sort of corrective action to get past that crisis. Now, does that mean nobody's going to die? Unfortunately,
Mike, that's called emergency care, not health care.
Well, what we've got is disease.
I'm sorry, I've had my hand up a long time. I'm not trying to talk, but I've had I put my heart hat up. Mike is wrong.
So, Mike, sorry, Don John, I didn't see your party hat. Apologies. But I do think that Don John actually has a point. That's emergency care. It's not health care. And so, go ahead, Don John.
Thank you. I brought this up earlier. Okay, first, it's exactly what I brought up earlier has happened. We're all talking about money. Now let's start at the very beginning of something maybe we can all think about. Is healthcare is either a human right or it's a privilege. And we need to determine it. Mike or whoever the last guy talking was clearly believes it's a privilege. I happen to believe, particularly in a modern society, that healthcare, and I'm talking about healthcare, okay, not emergency care, not after the fact, like my macular edema when I didn't get Medicare now is worse than it would have been had I had healthcare, and I don't have it because whoever's talking about being based on employment, I'm an artist. I don't want to be employed by your boss. So I have a worse eye issue that could have been resolved. But anyway, let's go back to it. So it's either a human right or a privilege? We have to start there. We're talking about trying to solve problems, not talk about minor issues. Okay, it's a right or a privilege. So you make that decision, and then from there, we determine how we're going to deliver it. Okay, the delivery process is obviously we want it to be efficient. If it's a privilege, then America has a pretty efficient system. You know, if it's a right, you know, I think America could deliver it, but it doesn't deliver it in that form. Now, I also asked that probably a lot of Americans here. I would ask that if ask you a question, do you believe in the American creed? Do you actually believe what we were founded based on, which is the Declaration of Independence, that all said we all had certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I question if you're really a so-called patriot and American, if you don't believe in 2023, access, equal and fair access to healthcare is not the protection of our inalienable right to life. Period. End of story. It is an obligation as Americans to fulfill. Garrett, I'm making a point that everybody's talking about money. This is the problem. It's not about money. These Canadian people, dudes, y'all pay 12% of your GDP for healthcare. Up it and you'll get better healthcare. We pay 18%. So why don't you Canadians go in, up your healthcare, and spend more money so that you can actually not wait in line? It's that simple. But see, so y'all are talking about money. Why don't we talk about outcomes? Okay, America has awful outcomes. We have wonderful healthcare. We have we lead the world in this, but we don't lead the world in providing healthcare to our citizens. And it is part of our founding creed. It's disgusting. Plus, it's a moral issue. I don't remember who was talking about it. Well, it's an economic issue, or is that? It's a moral issue. I mean, who here believes that I should have damage in my right eye because I chose to be an artist and could not get health care until I got Medicare, and by that time, it damaged it further? Please raise your hand if you think that I didn't deserve to get it, because you don't go to the emergency room for macular edema. You go to a eye doctor, whatever they're called, you know, so please, you know, let's get off this money thing. It's irrelevant. We have abundance. Everybody is in a paradigm that's ending. We're in an end time capitalist paradigm. I'm a big capitalist. I love it. Great. But it's ending. You know, it's not working. It's killing the planet. It's killing humanity. I know, Garrett, I'm going off on another thing, but it's relevant. It's like my ex-wife always says, you always go with the highest thing, but it's relevant. We have to start thinking differently, not competition, cooperation. You know, having our monetary system based on the advancement of the human condition, not just disconnected. And it's the whole thing is.
We're getting off healthcare now. We're getting off healthcare now.
Yeah. So
hey, Michael,
we've clarified that you know, there is some level of health coverage, you know, currently in the US for emergency care. We've also clarified that, you know, no one was willing to speak up and say that they think that the 40-year-old person with cancer should go bankrupt and die for lack of treatment. So I guess really the question is like a matter of degree, right? Like how much should be covered and at what expense? You know, which is a much more nuanced conversation, quite frankly, than, you know, I think we can easily have.
Oh,
so
they shouldn't.
What's that, Danny?
Could all be covered. We have abundance. You know, this is the problem. You're thinking small. It's not a problem.
So
we have abundance.
I want to let Dr. B respond to you, Don John, and then Samir and David R had their party hats on after that. So Dr. B. And then maybe he left. So Samir.
Hi, guys. So I appreciate and I understand the question, but we are a country of 50 states. And
Samir, you're just, if you're raising your party hat, it's to ask a question to Don John, who just spoke. So if you want to bring up a new topic, we'll get you when your hand turn comes up.
No, it's on the same topic.
Okay.
Right.
ahead.
We are a country of 50 states. So there are some states where if you are interested in healthcare, whatever the case may be, you will not be burdened. And there are other states, if you are interested in healthcare, whatever the case may be, right? You can be in state A. This is your situation. You are burdened. This is your situation in state B. You are not burdened. Right, because
did the Constitution say that the inalienable right to life was based on
Wait,
state?
wait, let's let him make his point. Let's let him
Michael,
make his...
he's speaking to me, so now go ahead. I'm just asking him a simple question.
So, as to healthcare, there are probably other people on this. There are other people who live in a state where when they go in and they seek healthcare, they know how much they're going to pay, give or take, right? And they're not going bankrupt because they live in a certain state, because their state cares for them, where other people could live in a state and their state doesn't care for them. And at the end, it becomes like, should the United States, I mean, at the end of the day, 50 states, we are everything, the Constitution, federalism, right? Obamacare, Trump care, whatever the case may be, right?
American Creed says inalienable right to life.
Please let him finish, Don John. We let you finish it when you were speaking.
He said he was bringing up a question. He's not bringing he's talking
Samir,
directly to what I
point.
suggested. He needs to address what I suggested, that it's
Right. It is a fair point, guys. Like, I really want to be strict in, if someone raises their party hat, we have a lot of people with hands up. If you raise your party hat, it has to be ask a question. You need to ask it within 20 or 30 seconds. If you don't ask a question within 20 or 30 seconds, you're going to be muted and we're going to go to the next hand.
Healthcare is an inalienable right. Everyone should have healthcare. But when you live in 50 states, and I, as someone that lives in...
This is not a question, Samir. I'm sorry, but you have to ask a question if you're doing a party hat, so I'm going to go to David R.
Yes, this is for Don John. Why do you think it's an inalienable right to have healthcare? You have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Nowhere does it say, and also free healthcare.
The Constitution doesn't detail things, nor, of course, that's the...
Okay, you're interpreting it though. You're saying, well, we also have a right.
But if you don't have, it's not
a right to have healthcare. And you say it's a right to have healthcare. You're saying people have to provide me with healthcare. They have to become slaves to my healthcare.
No. Okay, first we need to quit reading. Okay, David, go ahead, finish. Tell me when you're done.
Listen to me for a second, since I'm...
I'll listen to you. I don't have to take forever to listen to arguments I've heard 100 times.
I'm pretty quick if you let me talk. So the question is, it's a social contract. We take care of each other. That's not the same thing as the Constitution saying you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I think you should separate those two different things out.
First, it's not the Constitution.
By the way, guys, 1 second. I do think we should move on to another topic, because
Garrett, I think this is a highly important issue, because it's everybody's here's life. And we're talking about, David just suggested that it's not a human right, that it's a privilege. Okay, now that's really important. That has nothing to do with money. He truly believes that someone's right to life is a privilege. Okay, their right to access health care, to protect their... May I finish, David?
The right to life, what they're talking about is that you cannot be...
That's not what they're talking about, David. They're talking about, it's a social contract that we agree that the inalienable right to life is something that we wrote a Constitution for to protect. Now you suggest that no, it's a privilege to protect our right to life.
No,
guys, I'd love to sort of, we can have a separate night to focus on healthcare. We actually did have them when we used to be Socrates Cafe before.
I had a party hat, Garrett, which I wanted to contribute to the idea of allocation of resources, because in Toronto, in Canada here, like in Ontario anyway, there's a list of medication that is covered, and then there's a list of medication, well, everything else isn't covered. So in other words, say I need blood thinner, warfarin, which is a primary blood thinner, is free. But if I want the good one, which is called, there's something else, my mother used to get it. It was pretty expensive, and it's actually a better blood thinner. her private insurance had to pay for that. So it's an allocation of resources is an important concept that I think has been mentioned periodically here. You know, and in Ontario, it's not like everyone gets everything free. There's a list of medications, and if I want to go off list, I have to pay for it. That's all.
All right, so topics that people are interested in for you know, other political topics. You know, we've already done one on immigration, criminal justice. Education is one that we haven't really covered. So why don't we talk about you know, the typical dialogue that I hear in education is, should there be vouchers for everyone, or should we have you know, a focus on the public education system? My personal take is that we should focus on critical thinking skills in school, but you know, I would love to hear perspectives, and I'm going to go with hands this time. Charles, why don't you start us off if you want to mention something about education?
Sorry, I'll pass. I'll come back later.
Okay, no problem. Will, do you want to say something about education? You're on mute, Will.
Oh, sorry about that. I was just distracted for a moment. Just another thing. I've just been a bit distracted. Kangaroos are fighting. It's springtime here and they'll start fighting. Got to break it up every now and then, you know, because I'm such a good guy. But it only happens in spring. But anyway, the thing is, I just wanted to say as a little bit of an aside, because I'm such a fan of evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology, and my super psychic senses tell me, Garrett, that you may disagree with this, but I'm not sure. I was just going to say, I think our propensity for voting left or right can be determined by our personality type, which is hereditable. And I'd say people with a more egalitarian view of life will go left, and people with a more every man for himself view go to the right. So it's just a gross generalization, but I think it's quite apparent across all political systems. People on the left want egalitarian healthcare, education for everyone, tending towards socialism. But those who are sort of self-made, maybe more aggressive types tend to the right. I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong, but to me it seems interesting because the personality types existed before the political parties. So the political spectrum has evolved to accommodate the personality types, which are, I would say, universal across humankind. So I just find that interesting to consider that there are hereditable traits, and those on the right are sort of like, well, if you can't afford it, you don't get it. And those who tend to the left are probably more, I guess, perhaps benevolent by nature, and it's just the way we are. So I just wanted to say that. Sorry if it's too much of a digression.
No, I think it's an interesting observation. So Mike H., go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Derek put his party hat on. Did you want to respond to that? I'd like to get to the conversation about education, but if you want something quick, if you have a quick question, Derek, to
well, just to clarify, if a theory that there's collectivist societies and some that are more individualistic, is that what he was saying about evolutionary biology? Is that because
I think he's saying that I'm trying to clarify what he had just said about
well, it's a huge generalization. I understand that. So I understand it's complicated, but I mean, like, whether you're introverted, whether you're extroverted, these types of personality traits are hereditable to some degree, and then they're advanced by one's environment as to whether those traits present themselves or not. And I would say the same is with benevolence and altruism. They're hereditable traits, and the political parties across the world have evolved to accommodate the personality types and yeah, introvert and extrovert, being an individualism, other aspects of personality. Yeah.
So
Which side they're on, I don't know.
Let's come back to education if we could. Mike H, do you want to make a comment on education, whether you think like individual innovation and voucher systems and allowing privately funded education to, you know, be a significant percentage of education or students educated, or if we
Can
should
I make a suggestion to make the locker rooms and bathrooms like where the men or women are noticeable, like outside the door?
Sorry, should I go ahead?
Yeah, and the men's room has like a pink, I think, flyer in it. So, you know, I walk in, if I'm absent-minded, I get a little, you know, slight nightmare, you know. Like,
sorry, I think Garrett was addressing me. I'm Mike H. I'm not sure who's talking right now.
Charles, are you okay? I think he didn't realize he was off mute.
All right. So what I want to say is that anything that, I mean, I hate to generalize, but every time the government puts their hand in things, productivity goes down, and it's not as good as the private system. So I'm a product of free education by government as well, but I've seen the downside of that. So if the government is running the public systems, everybody like thinks the same way, is getting the same education. You lack the diversity of thought. If you have a private schools, every private school is going to teach whatever they want, whatever curriculum they want, assuming it's appropriate, of course, and you will have diversity in the education of the population. I'll give you another example is that when the government decided to subsidize students getting into universities, you end up with the student loan debt in the US, the big problem that we have right now, because the government is giving you money to go to university, which means that the university will raise prices because you're getting funds from the government, right? So that's all I have to say about it. Thank you.
Thanks. Abe, you had your party hat on.
Yes, I mean,
Abe.
especially, you know, when
sorry, was there someone, David, did you do it before Abe, or I missed?
No, you're fine. I didn't realize the party hat situation. I thought it was a hand situation.
Abe, just make sure you're asking a question of the prior of Mike H.
Yeah, you were talking about the private and the public education system. You know, I come from a place in which I studied in a public education system, which was subsidized by the government. Now, if you privatize it, I mean, things in the US is so expensive. If you want to go to medical schools, it's just next to impossible. And what do? We don't invest in our in professional education, like medicine and stuff like that. In fact, we have to go outside the country to import people rather than developing people in-house. Because in those countries, the government subsidizes it and they don't have a big loan like the way they do it in the US. Because if they complete their medical education, most of their life, they are paying back those loans. And that's the drawback with the government not investing.
Sure, but that's akin to the government investing in like wartime efforts as well. So if you know you're lacking certain skills, and I know that Canada has done it in the past, like a couple of decades ago, we were lacking skills in like architecture, engineering, and some other fields. And what Canada did at the time was very smart, is said, okay, well, the priority for immigration will be to the people with these professions. Pharmacists and all that, and that's how you do it. So if the government want to see a deficiency somewhere, they can actually target the money. That would be productive money, like Garrett was talking about right earlier. Okay, thanks.
So Mike H, I'm curious if you know private schools in the US don't have to have any common curriculum that will actually essentially prepare them to be productive citizens in any way, shape, or form. And they could be completely political in nature, meaning, you know, isolate someone from diverse political opinions and politically indoctrinate students. So isn't there a risk if you do that, if you give that level of autonomy to private education, and isn't there a risk that a significant percentage of the population could become politically indoctrinated and not productive citizens?
Well, if you leave it to the free system will make people realize that kids with that particular education from that particular school cannot get jobs. And hence, people will stop sending their kids there. It will take time to adjust, but that's just the free market.
What if they can get jobs, but they're politically indoctrinated?
They do now, unfortunately. I'm sorry to say, even in the public system, I've seen it in my work as well. If they don't get the indoctrination at school, they're gonna get it at home or from their friends. And I live in a small community here in New Jersey, and I've seen it in young kids. I don't know where they're getting it from, and they go to public school.
I mean, when you say political indoctrination, that's presenting only one side of the political spectrum. Usually it's the two major parties in the US that's happening. You're saying that you've seen people go to public school and not get a diverse education of what liberals and conservatives think about different topics?
Right. I've seen it in my kids. So I try to do my part at home and try to make them think that this is not a sport. Like I said in the beginning, it's like a game now. My team against your team. I don't care what my team does or how good they are or how bad they are. And I'm trying to get them to think differently, that, you know what, you're going to have to see who's proposing whatever to improve your life and make your life easier and make you more money so you can actually spend it on the community you live in. Not just tax you to death until you leave the community. But I'm not very successful with my kids, so the damage is already done for them.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you come from a particular political background and maybe your kids don't agree with you. Is that maybe what's going on, rather than that they got indoctrinated, but that they made their own decisions as human beings do, and they were exposed to diverse ideas by being in a public education system? Is that possible?
No, because I voted Democrat and I voted Republican in the past in Canada, and then I haven't voted yet in the US, but in Canada I voted Democrat and I voted Republican, or conservative as they call it there. So
yeah, I'm not saying who you vote for. I don't know. I'm just saying, I grew up in the US and I got educated here, and there was a very diverse, a lot of attention given to equally presenting different political spectrums, because teachers would get fired if they were seen as politically indoctrinating in public schools.
So unfortunately, we lost our media. Media was keeping things in check, both parties. We lost the media because the media now, at least that's my opinion, is leaning toward one party, not the other. I don't know for what purpose. But as soon as we lost the media, you lost all the good stuff that we were just talking about. And that started about in the year 2000 or 2001. You could see it with back in George Bush day and Al Gore, we were watching it around the world, and we were actually impressed with how America's democratic system is working. But it took a downturn. I don't know when exactly. At 2010 and around that time, things started getting really out of hand, and media, we lost it. We lost the media. That's my opinion. That's why I don't trust the media.
If we can cover education quickly, that would be an interesting topic to cover next. Is the media biased, and which media is biased? Abe, you have a party hat on.
Yeah, don't you think, it depends on where you live in the US. I live in a place in which we have a broad-minded, full spectrum of things. You can speak your mind out. There are different ideas which come out. If you were studying in some sort of private education, maybe, indoctrinated by religion, your perspective is going to be completely biased based on what the religion is and, things like that. And it's much better to be in a public system in which you can share your thoughts. And if you privatize it, you're not going to have that free thinking.
But you're assuming that in the public system you're going to have free thought. I don't think so. I think you're wrong there. You're going to have the thought that the public system allows you to have. It's not free thought.
Yeah, but then you don't have any consequence. They're not going to kick you out if you were in a private system and you speak against the norm there. You're going to be they're going to ostracize you, or they're not going to like it. It's like a groupthink mentality. There's no varied way of looking at things. Like if you studied in a religious school and you went and spoke critically questioned the religion, they're not going to appreciate it.
John has his party hat on. You have a question for Mike H?
Not really. It's kind of a question. It's an interesting.
If it's not a specific question for Mike H, then raise your hand and we'll definitely get to you. So Anna, do you want to present maybe a different perspective?
My perspective is, first of all, although I believe our Constitution and Bill of Rights do establish that we have the need to educate our citizens, and I like that you'd like them to be educated in critical thinking. At the present time, because our school system is in fact controlled at the local level, I don't believe this is what is happening in all areas. For example, Florida. I feel that the tyranny of the minority has kind of taken over our schools in a lot of areas, and this worries me. I also do not want to pay for kids to go to a parochial school. I simply don't want to pay for someone to be indoctrinated into a specific religion, because I'm hoping we still have a separation of powers between state and religion. That's my 2 cents.
So you're for public education, only the government only paying for public education, and if someone wants to get a private education, they have to pay for it, basically.
Affirmative.
Okay. So Derek, you have a question for either Mike or Anna?
Well, like for Anna, you don't like, I think I heard Anna say that she doesn't like to pay for somebody to send their child to I think she said a private school, parochial school. Anyway, the premise there is that there seems to be not in this private, it's a question of parental choice is involved here, and often you get into these public-private school things. People leave the parents out of it, and it says a lot when the parents are not even considered in the conversation, because the parents are the ones who are raising children, and until that child is of age, they have authority to direct the child as a responsible parent should, and the choices those parents make may not be ones you agree with, but those are the choices they make. At the same time, the state is taxing people and taking their money away, and then telling them you can only go to the public school, and this is what we're going to teach your kid in the public school, and you're not allowed to object. You're not allowed to keep your child out of the school. Where is the so that's the argument for the voucher system, where publicly funded vouchers enable the parent to choose where the child goes, and it's at least part tax funded. Parental choice but it may not be choices that I agree with or you agree
That's
with.
Again, I want to be very like that was a new topic, Derek. It wasn't a question for Anna, so I want to just raise your hands, guys, if you have a new topic that you want to bring up. I don't want to like stay on that. I want to let people ask questions of Anna and if they want to ask of of either any of the people who have spoken about that have given a perspective. But I want to go to David next, because the last person that raised their party hat raised it while Derek was talking. I don't want to go to Derek because we should go to David because he had his hand up.
Yeah, okay. Individualist societies versus collectivist societies. It seems that the United States on the spectrum is fairly individualistic. And by that, by having that characteristic, then allowing private and public, both in medical and in education, it suits the character of the United States that, in more collectivist societies, such as, say, Sweden, even Canada, perhaps, we do more public and less private, and there is probably less choice, than the Americans have. So that's all I have to say about. I mean, it's true of the education system as well as the medical system, as well as a lot of other social systems. Is that I think the United States leads the world in being individualistic, and that's part of, and I would argue that's one of the reasons. It's one of the major. It's a lot of variables, but the United States is one of the major powers of the world because of the character of the people who tend to be individualistic. So that's all I have to say. I think it's in a way, I think it's a good thing, but it has problems, right? It's the allocation of resources is pretty efficient in the United States, but of course it's not perfect. And a lot of people would argue, well, I want more money for the medical system because everyone should have more access to medicine or whatever. And yet being an individualistic society, you've got the conservatives saying, well, each man for himself, more or less, but let's be nice and at least help the poorest of the poor, which is that's and then Canada's more in the middle, helping more people and being less individualistic. That's all I have to say.
Not both parties are not hoping to help the poorest of the poor. Social services often are at risk and look to be cut by the political party that likes to cut social services for the poor. So, but that's a different topic. I want to do a quick fact check.
You can't paint all the conservatives as being that nasty. I mean, a lot of conservatives.
I'm not saying they're nasty. It's just they don't prioritize social services for the poor or the disabled. That's where they want to cut typically. And you can look that up. That's public record. Like this is debated in Congress all the time, and conservatives want to cut social entitlements. That's part of what they do. And I'm not judging it. I'm just saying that is a fact. And I also want to fact check Derek. Everybody gets to choose where their kid goes to school. Like everyone's allowed to put their child in a private school. I think Anna's point was, if you want to put your child in a private school that's gonna potentially like teach whatever they want, then you need to pay for it. It should be on your own dime. It shouldn't be publicly funded. So just want to clarify the fact check there. And that said, Charles has his hand up. Go ahead, Charles.
Could I just ask a very quick question to David?
Go ahead, Jenny.
I had my party hat on.
Sorry, I didn't see it, Jenny. Thanks for speaking up.
So David, in Canada, well, you have this universal health care. So how much more do you think general population pay in tax to support that? Isn't the general population pay more for medical insurance to support universal health care? Isn't that the way it
You're
works?
going back to healthcare, Jenny. We've moved on to education.
Oh, you did? Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
okay.
sorry.
All right, fine.
But we do pay higher taxes, but then we have less private insurance costs. So, how that washes out is, I don't know, to answer your question.
Charles, go ahead.
Yeah, so regarding education, a couple of things. One, I want to say that reducing education to either private or public would be, too simplistic, right? Because if you look anywhere in the world, all education systems is a combination of public and private. There's no completely public, no completely private education system. And regarding the efficacy of either, I think a lot has to do with how well a public education system is ran and how well a private education is ran and how well the combination of the two is. So I can give you an example, for example, to a counterpoint to the efficiency of private education. If you actually look at college education, the for-profit, so the most privatized educations actually was also the most inefficient, the most bankrupt, and the most scandals, right? You recall all those, IIT or whatever in the United States that mostly kind of preyed on people with less information about choosing what kind of major. So it's not clear at all, just simply having private education is going to get rid of some of the adverse incentives in the system. Now that said, when it comes to the public education, there's also potential for waste and potential for indoctrination. I agree with that. I definitely sympathize with the concerns of people that the public education system being a public good and supposed to be something above board, above political partisanship, should not be indoctrinating children in either left or right or any ideology. Now, that said, I also want to bring up the point that it is also not clear whether political indoctrination is an inherent quality of public education. Because I think even some of the speakers that raised a point pointed to 2010, I think, as when everything went downhill. I'd like to point out that before 2010, and for a long time, maybe 100 years, there was also a public education system, and there wasn't maybe as much indoctrination. So I do want to kind of separate the indoctrination aspect from being an inherent quality of public education. And I see this as a side note of more of our political system of people making their voices heard and holding the politicians accountable so they don't inject ideology into the system. And finally, I want to point out that on a GDP spent per capita basis, the United States is not doing very well in terms of education outcome compared to most developed countries. In fact, we're very middling, and there's a big education inequality issue in the United States, where if you look at probably the top 10%, top 5%, whatever, the education outcome is pretty good. But for the average person in the country, the education outcome is not very good. People point to our elite level university system, and that is entirely true. The United States has the most, the tertiary education that's envied by the rest of the world. However, I also want to point out that a lot of that's due to the fact that we attract all the best and brightest from around the world to our universities. So when you separate out all the immigrants that come to our university system, looking just our kind of native population going on there on a per capita basis, it's also not very impressive. Thank you.
So just to do a quick fact check, I did look up that there have been a number of teachers fired for giving political opinions. One put on administrative leave for making derogatory statements about the president at the time, and there's a bunch of examples that came up. So there are a lot of teachers' jobs are at risk if they give like one-sided political views. They get fired for it. There are lots of examples of it. If you look it up, you'll see it. So public schools, it is very much required that teachers be able to present a balanced perspective. Otherwise, their jobs are at risk. Derek, you had your party hat on. Did you have a question for Charles or what I just said?
Yes, actually, it could apply to both of you. But education, what about educational outcomes? Because there is data to suggest that public schools in the United States are failing in terms of educational outcomes. Varies very much from place to place, but that is attributed to poor teachers, poor school boards. Some say underfunding, but if you want to talk about what should happen with public education to get the best education possible for children before you get into public versus private, that data is rather
That's
important.
not a question, right. Derek, if you do your party hat, it has to be a question for someone.
My question is, have you considered In comparing these options, have you considered educational performance?
Yes. So, Garrett, is it okay if I respond to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So actually, I think you bring up a great point, and I'm actually not decided on this because it's a very complicated set of data. So I'll point to two things. One is that there's a sampling, inherent sampling problem which nobody can really get hold of, which is that do private education or private high schools perform better because they take the higher cream of the crop students? So you have to disaggregate the cohort. What is the student before and after, right? And that's very hard to do. So I think most data is really difficult to get around that. And I did point out that the U.S. public education system, actually education system in general, has major issues. What I was trying to say, maybe the more nuanced point I was trying to make, is that just because we have a bad version or bad execution of public education doesn't mean that public education is inherently bad. And I would say the same thing to private education, for example. For example, if we had a bad version of private education, like we did for private, like college education, like the for-profit college education, doesn't mean that for-profit educational system would be necessarily bad, right? For-profit is distinguished from private education, being the private education most are nonprofit, with big endowments versus the for-profit where they're literally trying to make rough. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Jenny, you have your hand up on education.
No, I'm sorry, Garrett, but I just want to compliment you again, as I always do. Your topic again is such a great topic and so important. It's a shame that it's only a 2-hour meeting because we can't seem to cover all the things that we should be able to cover.
That's why we meet every week, Jenny. We used to meet when I hosted in New York before coronavirus. I was doing it like every month or so, but we do it every week now so that we can cover a wide range of topics. But thank you for your appreciation. I will mention one of the things that Derek said is that the U.S. may lack funding, or some people may have a perception that the U.S. lacks funding in public education. I actually don't think that's very likely. The U.S. spends $12,000 to $13,000, almost $13,000 per student. At least they did in the 2018 to 2019 school year, and so it's probably gone up a little bit more than that. And there aren't a lot of countries that spend more than that. I think there are 10 that I'm aware of that spend more than that, is my understanding from ChatGPT. So we're amongst the highest in terms of expenditure. Whether we spend it intelligently or not is another story. I would argue we waste a lot of money. I can tell you when I was in high school, I looked at like I was teaching a computer class to students, like to teach them technology. As a student, I was also teaching the class basically in collaboration with one of the teachers. And we had to get resources donated to get computers for our class to teach technology to students. And it was really hard to get even passably good computers. And then I would go look at the principal's office, and all of these like administrative assistants had these really fancy computers that cost a ton of money. And I was like, why do these people have, these are office machines. They can be really dumpy computers and these people would be just fine, but they had the best of the best. And we had scraps to actually educate the students. So I would argue the allocation of student resources was probably very unbalanced and not always focused on education. Danny, do you have a question for me?
No, I have a question for Derek.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was trying to understand what you mean by the United States. So where do you get this statement that the United States is the most individualistic country in the world? I don't know what.
Oh, I didn't say that.
I don't know.
That was Will.
Those were your words. Those were your words.
I think that was Will.
Or David. I'm sorry, David. Whoever
David
said
R.
it. Whoever said it.
David
Sorry.
R.
David R. Yeah.
I apologize.
No worries. Hold the right person accountable.
Where do you get this concept of individualistic, number one? And if anything, when you go to a baseball game and a basketball game, everybody's wearing LeBron James T-shirt, and they go to, or they hooray defense, and all that conformity argues against individualism, and they allegiance to the Republican Party, allegiance to the Democratic Party. That's just the opposite. So I'm wondering where do you get your data, how you define it, and how you apply that concept.
Well, I think it's common knowledge. I would argue that the United States is the land of individual,
So
David, if on the idea of individual, it's got a heroic kind of a song line or a plot line.
David, if you don't mind, if I add a little bit of artificial intelligence fact checking here, you're absolutely right that there's an actual index called the Hofstede Insights website that talks about individualism of countries, and the US scores the highest in the world at 91 out of 100. Canada is 85, Australia is a 90, and the UK is 89. New Zealand is actually 91 or higher. So New Zealand is right up there with the US, interestingly. But the US is amongst the highest, if not the highest.
Well, can you look up how they define individualism?
Because we don't have time to do that now because we're about to end, because it's a little after 9 o'clock, and I've been up since really early this morning. But if I'll type the name of the website so that you can look it up, because we're all about seeking truth in the FTI, and so I want to give you the breadcrumb trail to follow, even if I can't give you the answer of how they do it tonight.
Thanks for bailing me out, Garrett.
David, I used my free will to do that, David. Sorry, right. I couldn't help it.
You converted me.
Well, this survey doesn't convince me till we know how they define it.
No, I don't expect you to be convinced, Danny. I expect you to look it up and see whether or not you're convinced, and to listen to it with an open mind and see whether or not they have a good way of defining it. And if they don't, Danny, create your own index of individualism and, be an entrepreneur, right? And come up with a better mousetrap. Why not? So, and I'm not being sarcastic. I mean that. If someone does it poorly, then do it better and you'll be successful at it. So, that's what I'm doing with my company. So I fully support that. And I don't know, Danny, whether or not they do it well, because I literally typed the question into ChatGPT and that's what came up. So I don't know anything about it other than that ChatGPT knows about it. So that said, I do want to thank everyone for coming, but I'm going to close out now.
Garrett?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I'd just like to say that in the chat, I posted the website for joining the Freethinkers Institute, which is composed of a lot of people like Garrett and others. If you want to join, it's a great place to have great conversations and expand your horizons.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. And Michael and Charles are both members as well. And I want to mention some upcoming events we have. Is that self-confidence or egotism next week? So I hope people will come for that. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And then same life versus post-life karma, are they real? Coming after that. And then we're going to talk about globalism. What is it? Is it good or bad? And then after that, we'll talk about the FTI guide to practical stoicism. I also want to put the link for the next event so that people could RSVP now. I'd like to start doing that 5 minutes before the end of the event, but I forgot to do it. So maybe Michael can help me next time. So if anyone wants to come to our next event, I just put it in the link, and it's is that self-confidence or egotism? I think people very often confuse self-confidence and egotism, thinking one is the other and the other is the one. And it's so important to know the difference, because a self-confidence person should engender trust and an egotistical person should engender distrust. And if you can't tell the difference between which one someone is, you may be trusting the wrong people. And so that said, hope people will come for that, and you can all use your own critical thinking skills, like the third intention says, of the FTI, to decide what's right or wrong. And I think people did that tonight. I definitely learned from this. I hope other people learned from it. I appreciate everyone's great comments and varied perspectives. That's what we want to do in the FTI, is bring together diverse perspectives so that everyone can listen to each other with an open mind and better understand people that especially we disagree with strongly, which I opened up with my quote about that. So thank you all so much for the rich discussion, and I hope you all have a great rest of your night and or morning, as the case may be for the Australians, and hope you all come next week. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.